he was very interested in the Hermetic wisdom, and this then became established among intellectuals in Europe. The greatest minds, read the book, studied it, thought it through, and said, yes, that's right. And among them, we have Leibniz, who was one of the greatest intellectuals of European history, who later studied this work. He published his approval of it, and he was trying to understand it mathematically. And he adopted Chinese ideas from the I Ching that was translated at that time. And he extended the perennial wisdom. And then Newton, Sir Isaac Newton, agreed. He adopted the same thing. Again, he tried to put it into mathematics. And then when India and Britain became, intellectual colleagues, people like Sir William Jones, who was very important, the first man to learn Sanskrit from Britain, he realized, well, it's the same with Hinduism and Indian philosophy. So he adopted the same strategy. Now, I think this is very exciting. This is a tradition that's been a bit lost in the West. We've become obsessed with mathematics and quantified knowledge. I would like to see us bring back the perennial philosophy. Aldous Huxley took the same idea in the 20th century, and it's never died. It's always been there bubbling away. But in academia, it's somewhat, because academics like to have their specialisms and boast their specific knowledge, this idea of a general universal wisdom has gone out of fashion. However, and the point of our seminar today, in India, it's never gone. What I love about Indian intellectuals and philosophers is this is their central thesis. Sanatan Dharma is the universal wisdom. They've never forgotten this. They've never sold out to the particularization of an obsession with mathematics and et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's very important we open this discussion between Western intellectuals aware of the perennial philosophy and Eastern Indian universal intellectuals aware of Sanatan Dharma. Are we talking about the same thing? I believe we are, but I think the details are very important, how we got there. And, Hinduism, Jainism, Buddhism, they all have their own strategies. And let's honor those differences and celebrate them, but then let's find a unity. Okay, so that's my introductory remarks to welcome everyone. And so our first speaker today, who will speak from that tradition of Sanatan Dharma, is Professor Gavin Flood, who's an old colleague, an old friend of mine from the University of Oxford, which is, I think Oxford, I love Oxford. I used to teach there myself a little bit. I think, these great universities of the West were founded on this universal wisdom tradition, blending Christianity with the rediscovery of Greek thought, Aristotelian philosophy, and to some extent Platonic thought. And Gavin is speaking to us from Oxford. And I would like to introduce him simply. I would say he's Britain's leading expert on Hinduism. So if anyone knows about Sanatan Dharma, I would say Gavin is the expert from the British perspective. So welcome, Gavin, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Thomas, for that generous introduction. Greetings, everybody from Oxford. I'm very, very flattered to be invited to speak to you today. I've given you a handout that we don't have much time, so I just thought I'd first of all just like to raise the question or the problem about perennial philosophy. Secondly, look at I didn't have much time to do this, but look at some range of sources of Sanatana Dharma, and thirdly, if we have time, propose a new kind of way of looking at this idea of perennial philosophy. So I suppose the first problem is, how do we account for the diversity and divergence of philosophical claims and intellectual forms of life? If it is the case indeed, as it says in the seminar statement, that an eternal, universal, underlying substratum of truth beneath all religions, religious, philosophical, and scientific traditions. So there is that. How do we account for diversity? And then further problems arise from that. If this is the case, then what's the evidence for it? Can it be demonstrated? And so I think those are important questions that we need to address, because one of the, certainly in India, the history of philosophy in India has not only been one of agreement, but one of rigorous contestation of metaphysical claims and so on, with the different schools of Vedanta arguing with each other, and against Buddhism as well, and Jainism. And in the area that I look at, Shaivism, the dualist Shaivas versus the non-dualist Shaivas. That's my field of expertise. So anyway, I think we have to raise that question. Now, the notion of Sanatana Dharma, which became very popular in the modern world. In fact, there are now, I don't know about in India, but in Britain, there are Sanatani Dharma temples. It's a very popular Hindu movement, as it were. I suspect that its popularity began in the 19th century, as I'll talk about in a minute. But the actual phrase Sanatana Dharma, I thought this was very interesting. So I tried to, I had a look, I did some searches in the history of the texts that I'm familiar with and that I have access to. And I suspect the popularization of the term came with Vivekananda, but I'm not 100% certain of that. And Sanatana is simply an adjective derived from san, I think, plus the root tan, which is to stretch. So it's something which is eternal, which goes on and on, an uninterrupted or endless series. And the earliest occurrence of the word I could find was in the Upanishads, in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. It may be in the Veda, but I was unable to find it there. Where it's a name, somebody's name listed in a list of names. And in the Katha Upanishad, another ancient text, it refers to an ancient story told by death, but it also occurs. Its main occurrence in a more modern, in a more sort of sense that we understand it, occurs in the Bhagavad Gita and in the laws of Manu. So I won't go into all my examples, but in Manu, you get the Dharma Sanatana, you get the adjective combined with the noun together, not in a compound, but as connected together. And here it seems to mostly refer to not the absolute, not Brahman, not the unchanging reality, or there is one instance where it refers to that, but it refers to Varnashrama Dharma. It refers to your Dharma, your law, your duty, your social obligation, and your duty regarding your stage of life and the section of society in which you're born into. So I've quoted all the examples from Manu in the handout there. But it's the Bhagavad Gita where there are occurrences. There are actually 5. I found another one since I've done my handout. So there are 5 occurrences. The first is in chapter 1, verse 40, where Krishna speaks to Arjuna of the importance of doing his family duty, his kula dharma, his duty with regard to his kula, his family. And this, he says, is an eternal duty, sanatana dharma. So that's an interesting instance of that. The word sanatana without dharma occurs in chapter 4, where it's related to Brahman. Those who enjoy the nectar that remains from the sacrifice go to the eternal Brahman. They go yanti Brahma Sanatanam, they go to the eternal Brahman. And in chapter 7, Krishna calls himself, know me, Arjuna, as the eternal seed, the Sanatanam Bijam, in all beings, the seed of the absolute in all beings. Perhaps the closest to our more modern understanding is chapter 9, verse 18 CD, where it talks about Shashvata Dharma. You get this compound Shashvata Dharma. Shashvata is just another, is a synonym for Sanatana. And Sanatana follows that. So you got Tvam Avyaya Shashvata Dharma Gopta Sanatanastvam Purusho Matame. So you are the imperishable protector of the eternal law. I cognize you as the eternal spirit, power, person, it's her God. So there, I think that's the closest that we have to our modern notion, in a sense, where we don't get Sanatana Dharma as a compound, but you get Shashvata Dharma as a compound. You also get, I asked a colleague of mine, and he gave me several instances of Sanatana Dharma in the Bhagavata Purana. So what does this mean? Sanatana Dharma seems to refer originally to the duty, your duty in the Brahmanical system, especially regarding social standing, and also to the eternal law. Varnashrama Dharma was your duty with regard to your class and your stage of life. But there's also an indication that it refers to an absolute power, Krishna as God, and an eternal, unmanifested higher being. So we do seem to have that. There are later examples of the same idea. For example, the Nature Tantra text I study, it speaks about different gods and systems as modalities, Bhava Beda, of an absolute reality. So it is a theme that occurs throughout. Now I've got to fold up my presentation. I realize that. So yeah, now I was going to, we haven't got time, but there's a possibility. How do we approach this? We don't seem to be getting very far positing the notion of an eternal truth. And so I will argue that we need to focus on the human and see how the idea plays itself out in the history of civilizations. And that the perennial philosophy is a kind of philosophical anthropology and it indicates an orientation towards what used to be called transcendence, but what I would prefer to call verticality. And there's a scientist, a professor of quantum physics here in Exeter, here in Oxford, Exeter College, speaks about glorious mystery in physics. What he calls the glorious mystery constrains our understanding of the quantum world. And so perhaps in a parallel way, we could say that the glorious mystery constrains our understanding in terms of philosophy and the history of religious traditions. Thank you for your attention.
Well, thank you so much, Gavin. You do have a couple more minutes if you want to. Do you want to comment at all on the perennial philosophy of the Western tradition? Is it alive and well in Oxford, or?
No, I think it's completely dead. But yeah, I leave that to you. You've done all your work on the history of the perennial philosophy, and it is an important theme. I think it's probably due for a revival.
But there is the paradox. I mean, you're based in a Roman Catholic college at Oxford, and there is this paradox. It was a Catholic idea. The word Catholic means universal thinking. And when I went to the Vatican Library, I just like to report to everyone, I have a reader's ticket. The most well-read book on all the shelves in the Vatican Library was the Hermetic Mysteries. And it was thumbed so well. Obviously, hundreds of people have been reading it. So all the learned tomes of Thomas Aquinas and all that were all crispy, never read. Everyone had been reading the Hermetic Mysteries. I could tell it was the most popular book.
How interesting.
So I would just say there must be some Catholic thinkers in Oxford that know this tradition, like Stucco that I mentioned, you know, and there is a kind of lineage of thought there. Ask around.
yeah. Well, my colleagues here in the Jesuits are very learned, and they do know about the history of these things. But and indeed they do emphasize the Catholicity of their tradition, its universality. But most of the Jesuits here are fairly heretical, so it'd be interesting to what they think.
Well, maybe we need to redefine what is heresy within the Christian tradition, because actually I would argue universality is orthodoxy, and the fear of being too universal should be expunged from Western thought. That's what we're up against. There needs to be a Copernican revolution on this question of orthodoxy versus heresy.
Indeed.
We have to make perennial philosophy actually center place in Western thought, that it is the orthodoxy, it is truth.
Yes, but the problem is we have to account for different truth claims. So like Buddhism would say, argue for the doctrine of no self, whereas Shaivism argues for the doctrine of a self. And they write books arguing against each other. So how do we account for those differences?
Well, that's a very, very good question. I'm going to hopefully provide an answer to that in my winding up remarks.
Okay.
I think I've got the solution to that one. But anyway, thank you so much. You've stimulated a lot of thought for many people, I'm sure. Now we're moving on to our friend from Canada, Sachin Raja, who is joining us all the way from near Vancouver. And he's a spiritual warrior for truth, of an Indian background, but a universal internationalist. And he's also going to be introducing another speaker for us, Maitreyi, who's joining us, I believe, from India. So, Sachin, over to you, sir.
Very good. Thank you, friends. Blessings. Well, on this note of the timeless struggle between Atma and Anatma, which is, do we have an individuated self? Is there no internal self or individuated self? So this is a perfect segue, what we were just leaving with, to enter that. This has been one of my foundation, if you will, contemplations since very young. At a young age, I had these experiences of a divine nature of self, that myself was some aspect of the divine wholeness. And then when I did some forms, I entered, in my 20s, I did these very radical Zen koan intensives. They were called Enlightenment Intenses, where we pick a question: who am I? What is life? What is another? And we do a koan-oriented type meditation where we sit together with another. Another gives you an instruction, tell me who you are. We go through a 4-stage exercise meditation where we put the attention on the sense of self, whatever that sense of self is in the moment. We intend to have a direct experience of our true nature, whatever that is. And then we open up within to whatever arises in consciousness. Whatever arises in consciousness, we express to our partner, who receives it and says, thank you. And then we switch. And in that switch, then I would give my partner that instruction, tell me who you are. So anyways, we did this process 40 minutes, about 12 times a day, 6 a.m. till midnight, 3, 4, 5 days. In my circumstance, it was a 2-week intensive. And the purpose of this was to drill down layer by layer to de-identify with the conditions, the imprints that we have regarding who am I, what is life, what is another. We have endless imprints and ideas and ideologies and impressions regarding these very topics. Obviously first of all, on an intellectual, philosophical level. And as we go down in this inquiry, we become more and more exposed to the deeper awareness elements of these structures of is there self, no self. And when you're drilling down for days in a row, there's moments of exasperation. This is the perennial, if you will, deep dive and challenge of discovering one's true nature, which has been around forever. And that's why we're all here. Well, in this inquiry, it came to a place in my consciousness that, are we self? Because it felt absolutely self, and I had deep experiences of my divine nature. And then I started having these experiences of no self, no center, no reoccurring I, just some form of pattern that continues to move forward in some form continuum, which we call time, space, matter, energy. And then what had happened in a blinding moment, about a week into this contemplation, it hit me. And it hit me that the term Atma, or if you will, or Atma, is the same thing from different viewpoints. And that this contention that's happened in philosophical traditions, as Gavin was sharing wonderfully today, is because we're not directly in touch with the nature of that. And so when we come out of that tacit union with truth, of course, we will have a relative viewpoint. Because in the moment of union, there is no relativity. Outside of the moment of union, everything is relative. And so in that relativity, that absoluteness will naturally divide into the foundation duality of Atma and non-Atma. We cannot have in an existential, if you will, dimensional existence or consciousness, anything that is solid as one and not the other. Both have to arise in this, if you will, consciousness. So how was I able to explain, how can it be both without any contention? And then it came to me, the word team, T-E-A-M in the English language. The word team in the English language is both singular and plural. Team, of course, it's one team, whatever football team, soccer team, sports team, an organization team. And in that plurality, there is also the individuality. And so it's both for myself. So when I now have this awareness on myself, and I say, is this sense of self that I have, is this located, non-located? There's a duality. Is it a self or non-self? There's a duality. And of course, it'll be answered and received, and in this way of exchange, always show up as some form of duality. But my experience is this, that it's one and the same. And then laughing with one of my mentors years ago, Hakim, who was in Egypt, he was a wisdom keeper from Egypt, Abdel Hakim. And before he passed, I was having the same chat with him, and he was laughing as well. He said it's the same viewpoint, same exact experience from a different viewpoint. So I want to end with that I believe that rather than have this contention, we can continue to invite people into deeper meditation, to go beyond the current status and status quo of one's current attainment of understanding, and be willing to dispense with the gamut of our full understanding in the continuous seeking of what is a truth, what is the absolute truth that moves beyond any contentious consciousness, any divided consciousness in my own self. Then when this experience is realized, what happens is we as leaders, we as beings of transmission of the Sanatan Dharma, we are now transmitting from our core the universality from our own experience and us living it. And so I finish with an invitation for all of us, novices, intermediate scholars, in the realm, in this whole search, expansion, and offering of Sanatan Dharma in the world, that we continue to humble ourselves and go for the direct experience of our true nature and not rest until we are at one with that, and that we are transmitting the universal oneness, which includes the multiplicity of views. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now,
Thank you so much, Sachin. Can you just introduce your friend, Maitreyi, who's going to speak now for the rest of your slot? Just
Absolutely.
Introduce her to us, please.
So Maitreyi Yogacharini, she is a wonderful sage here in Canada. We have met, we've known each other for a few years, a spiritual sister, wonderful colleague. And, you know, in my years in spiritual practice and cultivation, I really value those who are living and embodying the teachings and are true, genuine expressions and embodiments of the work. And so Matai represents to me someone who is so simple, humble, and comes from a very ancient South Indian lineage, which she'll share perhaps a little bit of herself. But I invited her because I believe her embodiment of Sanatan Dharma is something that we all could be served with today. So welcome, sister.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bhaiya Satyan, for inviting me. Yesterday morning, that's Friday morning, I got a little message on Messenger. And he was like, are you up to waking up at 4:30 in the morning? And I had first imagined that a speaker hadn't come or dropped out last minute. And then I saw the beautiful generosity of spirit. I call him Bhaiya, where Bhaiya wanted to share his slot with me. And that generosity of spirit is what defines someone who is connected to Sanatana Dharma. So it is a living Dharma, which is not the privilege of just the panelists, but the birthright and the responsibility of every single person in this universe. So it starts off with the premise that if we are Atman, we are Atman, not if we are Atman, and therefore we have to tap into this universal divine matrix to create dharma or harmony in our lives, and also share this harmony, exude this harmony wherever we go. So I'm going to start with a very simple Shanti Mantra, and I'm going to request everyone to close your eyes for a moment. So sit comfortably and simply be aware of your breathing. Watch your breath as it moves into your nostrils, into your windpipe, into your lungs. And watch the breath move out. Now the sages or the rishis, I like to call them the ancient researchers, they said as we quieten the mind, the chatter of the mind, then we can listen to the song of the breath. There's a great poetry in their expression. And the song of the breath, as with the first syllable of Sanatana, starts with Sa, also as with the first note in Indian classical music. So Sa Aham is the song of the breath. Of course, it took them years and lifetimes to research and tune into this. So let's just sit with this vibration of Sa Aham. I am the eternal, I am the infinite, which comes together as Soham in Sanskrit. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om. We can slowly, gently open our eyes. So a beautiful Shanti Mantra to remind us that we need to come together for this beautiful endeavor of tapping into Shruti. So Shruti is this great revelation, and it said the Vedas were revealed. They were not invented, they were discovered. So in classical music as well, we have this beautiful principle. My music teacher would say, okay, listen first, to the pitch, to the Shruti. And sometimes we can be tone deaf. And that's why the Sanatana Dharma, or learning one's Dharma, is a living tradition in India, where the teacher tells us that, yeah, sometimes you're tone deaf and you shouldn't be thinking you're a musical maestro, or you shouldn't be going on, Indian Idol or auditioning for American Idol. And sometimes we can live in that illusion of a lack of self-awareness. So this living tradition was there for the purpose of self-awareness, for the purpose of developing this beautiful sense of tuning in. And the acharyas, the teachers, the gurus were all there to support that beautiful blossoming or unfolding of the human spirit. So I'd just like to end with this little expression, or this little story. I won't go into the story of it, but many of you know the Yaksha Prashna, where Yudhishthir was asked many questions by this Yaksha in the lake. And some of the questions, of the more than 120 questions, a few questions were about dharma. And when the Yaksha asked, what is laziness? Then Yudhishthir says, laziness is not following one's dharma, or not doing one's dharma. And then he says, what is the best dharma? He says, the best dharma is daya, or compassion. And he asks, is dharma a logic? And Yudhishthir says, no. He says, oh, is it there with the sages and the rishis? And again, Yudhishthir says, no. And then the Yaksha asks, where is it? And Yudhishthir says, it is deep within the cave of one's heart. So I'll close with that thought for all of us. How do we get deep within the cave of one's heart? That is the entire sadhana. That is the entire practice. So I'll just say thank you to everyone on that note.
Thank you so much, Maitreyi. That was a beautiful contribution. And thank you, Sachin, to giving generously of your own speaking slot. So let's move on to our next speaker, who is Srimati Neera Mishra, and who is going to be speaking, hopefully. She's the chairperson of the Draupadi Foundation. And it follows very rightly on from Maitreyi, because she's going to be speaking to us about the role of women in this tradition, Sanatan Dharma. And so, Neera, over to you. You'll have to unmute your microphone.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good evening, everybody. Namaskaram. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Greetings.
Okay. Thank you so much for this kind invitation. And I was really sorry I was a little late, but a very, very enriching conversations I've heard just now. But I have been told to speak about, especially focused on women. I'll take forward what my previous speaker said, that in India, Sanatan Dharma is a living tradition. Sanatan Dharma is just not a living tradition, but it is a living practice. As we Indians understand Sanatan Dharma, it is our real nature and eternal connect with the whole universe, the Brahmand. So we are a part of the Brahmand. We see the Brahmand in each and every living being, not only living, even inanimate beings. And that is why we also worship stones, not just trees. And we have the power to energize stones. So Sanatan Dharma in India, especially focused on the family system of which the women are the core, I would like to say is incomplete without men. In India, Sanatan Dharma teaches that men and women, the two energies that come together to recreate the world that God has created. They live together and they work together, and they work together with certain principles of life. And those principles of life have been given to us by centuries of research of our rishis, as she rightly said, that they were the real researchers. So through years and years and years of penance, our rishis were able to connect directly the heart, the energy, the soul to the Brahman, understand the principles of the Brahman, and then give us a system of life, which system will keep us connected to nature, connected to each other in a way that we live for the good for the other. And in Sanatan Dharma, it is not myself. It is myself evolved so much that it is we per se. We say the whole world is a community. The whole world is a family. So, but coming back to women, if you will know that anything about the principles that have been bestowed to us by our ancestors, right from the time a child is conceived, we are having in our life what is called the solar sanskars. From the time a child is conceived, there is a sanskar, there is a ritual. Till the end, when we die, there is a ritual. So we connect through each ritual to our being, but also to not only the nature, but to the society. So every ritual involves people. Every part of our life, a living tradition, makes us so encompassing that we feel that we are not alone, and yet we are alone in our relationship with God. That is the best part of Sanatan Dharma, that it tells you that you understand what you are, and then you follow whoever you want to follow. A lot of people, they get very confused when they say that, oh, somebody is talking of Ganesh, somebody is talking of Shiva, somebody is talking of Ram, somebody is talking of Krishna. But for us, they're all the same. A lot of misperceptions have come up about Sanatan Dharma, and I'm extremely grateful to this great panel who has again revived this dialogue. So there is a very important intellectual part that we heard in the beginning, but there has to be something more practical to connect people to Sanatan Dharma. Sanatan Dharma is just not getting into and becoming a rishi or becoming a sannyasi or sannyasin. If you are truly Sanatan, then you live your life in such a way that you make others' life better. So why did we go wrong, and how do we correct that? My little understanding of the last 25 years of study in this field, I just want to share something very interesting. Somebody mentioned Yudhishthira. I come from the place, I have a centuries old linkage to the birthplace of Draupadi. And it was also the place where she was married, the Swayamvar. So Sanatana Dharma treats women as equals. So we are equal right from the time we are born. We have given the same sanskara as the boys are given. We have the right to choose our own husbands. And our Rig Veda tells us that if you want to empower a family, empower the woman, give her education. So a lot of misperceptions you would know, since you are all in the universities and teachers, there is so much misperception created about Indian systems of treatment of women, which is absolutely, I would say, misperceived and based on a lot of wrong, misinterpreted sometimes, and sometimes deliberate disinformation. Women have a very, very important role to play in our society and keeping forward the tradition of Sanatan Dharma. And this Sanatan Dharma, as I said, the solar sanskar, it's very scientifically created. If you study each ritual of our society and you think about it, it is science. The moment the child is conceived, there are certain rituals and prayers done. It's the energy given to the woman that her child grows in a healthy way. Even before the birth of the child, there is a sanskar where the havan is held. So, you know, Draupadi, they say, was born out of a yajna kund. The yajna is a very integral part of a woman's life when she is pregnant. It normally happens in the 7th or the 8th month, because that is the right period for a woman to be ready to get the child, beget the child. So the Sanatan Dharma has created a series of practices, a series of, it's like, you know, it's your brain and it's your life. In your life, you use your brain to achieve certain objectives. You attain certain objectives in the management field when you're doing your business commercially. In the Sanatan Dharma, they used the brain, they understood the capacity of the brain to be influenced positively or negatively, and thus they created the rituals so that there is always a positive energy coming into the life, into this home. All of you know that the very famous saying that in a house where the women are treated well, that is the house of prosperity. Now, all our deities which give us power, Shakti, are worshipped. And they are worshipped not only as males, not only as Shiva or a Ram or a Krishna, but mostly they are worshipped as women. The Shakti of wealth is Lakshmi. The Shakti of knowledge is Saraswati. The Shakti of, other powers, we have different forms. We have Kali, so a human being, in order to live through life, needs certain energies at certain times to overcome certain aspects of life. And thus these things are structured in such a way that from childhood we are given that training that if you want to create a good life, you have to be empowered with all these multiple Shaktis. So I think the women's role in Sanatan Dharma is very centrifugal, but it is incomplete without the role, without the support. So if the woman is the nucleus, then the facilitator, the energy, if woman is the energy, then the facilitator for that energy to empower, to grow into a fruitful tree, it comes from the male. So Sanatan Dharma has never distinguished between male and female, which is a wrong principle. As I said, my little understanding of the wrong perceptions that have been created by these eternal principles of life, which are in tune with the nature, that principle of life which makes us worship our rivers as Ma Ganga and Ma Saraswati or Ma Yamuna, or the trees that we feel, and there are certain trees which we feel are very good for us, like people, which gives us a lot of oxygen. We pray to that. It's praying means you are coming near to that and you are imbibing that energy. So what happened is that I think over a period of time in the world, as it grows, as the world became more and more commercial, religion came in. I distinguish completely between religion and dharma, because religion restricts you to a certain, sectarian aspect, whereas Sanatan Dharma is not sectarian. Sanatan Dharma says everybody is equal, follow whatever you are doing, but don't mix your dharma with your religion. It's like you going to your office, you may be a chartered accountant and studying accountancy, but don't confuse that with your responsibilities to your house, to your family, or to your own self, because you are answerable to your own self. What you are going to be in your next life is also in your hands. The most important part of Sanatan Dharma for me, I think, is the value to karma, the value to your actions, which is very scientific. Whatever science very, very clearly says, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So your karma will stay with you. It will give you your results as per the karmas. And that is why throughout our life, we are given certain principles. As I said, the 16 sanskar ke alawa, we have something very interesting called Ayurveda. Now the Ayurveda, Ayu comes from life, Veda comes from scientifically validated knowledge, the root of knowledge. So we have the principles of Ayurveda. So Sanatan Dharma tells us to use Ayurveda. Sanatan Dharma tells us to use certain rituals in order to live in tune with the universe. Universe includes every human being. We never differentiate between any human being. And that is why the role of women in Sanatan Dharma in India has been very integral, because men have treated her as the, there is a state of Bengal, West Bengal in India, which is now going to elections. The woman of the house is called Ginni. The Ginni word comes from gold. The gold coin is called Ginni. That means she's so precious. This is the teaching of Sanatan Dharma in our society. And it is the only society that has, the only civilization, the oldest civilization which has survived. It has survived, I think, because we have created a system of principles of life in order to work for the greatest good, for the good of the greatest people. Coming back to the Mahabharata war, Krishna represented Dharma. And Krishna sided with the Pandavas because I work a lot on the Mahabharata. For 20 years, I have been writing on Mahabharata and books on Indraprasth and you name it. So Krishna sided on the side of the Pandavas because they were with Dharma. Now what is again here Dharma? There is a political Dharma, there is a family Dharma, there is a Dharma towards your friends. So for everything there are laid principles in life which are universally, and the word I'm repeating, it was said by our previous speaker, they are universally applicable, because whether it is trees, whether it is water bodies, whether it is the sky or the sun or the planets or any human being in any part of the world, we are affected by these all 5 elements of the universe. And how to control them, how to create in our brain the capacity to be empathic, have empathy, as well as have sympathy, as well as have the power to counter the wrong. So if you're only empathy but don't have the power to counter wrong, then the Mahabharata will be repeated. And that was the lesson of Krishna, that if you follow Dharma, then you are safe and you will always be safe and I will be with you. That means the superior, the Paramatman. See, the Brahman is the Paramatman and we are the Atman. In order to be in tune with Paramatman, we have to follow the principles which have been studied for centuries and laid down for us. So women have become very central in this, whether it is in India or everywhere. I think we need to promote that Dharma, Sanatan Dharma, has to be de-linked with religion. Then only we are able to take forward this discourse. And I think the discourse should come down to the general public in a more practical terms, in terms of analyzing the scientific value of each of our rituals. I'll tell you a very simple ritual and then I will end, because otherwise it will be
sorry, Neera.
No. When we do prasad, we put tulsi in it. And then we say, don't give prasad to anybody without tulsi. Now, tulsi is an antibiotic. It is very good for your health. And the prasad is always touched by many people. And most of the time it is cut into pieces, the fruits, etc. So it's a preventive method that if you're having prasad touched by 10 people, please have tulsi along with it, so that you are preventing yourself from, by chance, if there is any infection. You keep tulsi in your angan, because tulsi has the power to drive away insects. And tulsi, you must, if you keep and look after it, and every day if you have 1 leaf of tulsi, it is good for your health. So it's a ritual.
Thank you so much, Neera. I have to stop you. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I just said I'm going to.
Thank you so much. I have to be a bit strict. We have 15 minutes each. Thank you so much for your contribution. Tulsi is one of my favorite plants because of Acharya Tulsi, who was a great Jain inspiration to many people in non-violence. But you raised some really important points about the role of women in Sanatan Dharma. And the trouble is we have such brilliant speakers here. Everyone could speak for an hour. And maybe we'll do a second one of these. I'm sorry to cut you off. We have to make room for our dear friend Gulab Kothari, who's our next speaker. who is as you probably know, he's the chairman of Rajasthan Patrika, one of the most important newspapers in India. And he's a living embodiment of applied Sanatan Dharma. Many of our speakers have said, it's all very well to get the philosophy and the theory, but what do we do in practice? Gulab, through his papers, his media, his television program, is trying to get across the idea of truth to the common person, and has been honored by many awards and so on over the years. So Gulab, share your thoughts with us, please. And I'm so grateful that you're able to join us from, I believe you're in Jaipur, is that right?
Yes. Thank you, Thomas. Greetings to everybody. This word Sanatan is something to do with a vision of the soul, the Atma. We say Atma, soul, is not born, it never dies. This word Sanatan, it travels with the soul. It doesn't die with the body, it's not born with the body. So it is available to you before the birth and after the death also. That's why it is called Sanatana. This is the beauty of Indian thought. It's not philosophy. This word philosophy doesn't exist in the verses of Veda. We have imported this word, incorporated our education, and today all our darshans have become philosophies. They are taught under the banner of philosophy, but they are not. We have to think all ancient literature of this country is based purely on science. And when I say science, it never changes with time. 5,000 years back, it was the same. 5,000 years after, it will be the same. Let everything else change, which we called their civilization. It keeps changing with time. So, the philosophy also will keep changing with the time. Tomorrow when the technique comes, 5G comes, artificial intelligence comes, your philosophies will definitely change because we will be different. Life will be different, aspirations would be different. Dharma also will not change with the time. And so is the Atma, it will not. And it's the same simple example that the whole atmosphere around us contains 3/4 of water. Earth contains 3/4 of water. Body contains 3/4 of water. When you talk about science, it stands good at all levels. You cannot change them, you cannot change them. First thing, let us be, and we are the product of the nature. This is what our education doesn't teach us. We are why we say we are one? Because we are the leaves of the same tree. This is what our Veda says. Krishna also says the same thing. We are like a tree upside down. So the seed is sown on the sky upwards, and it travels downwards towards the branches and leaves and fruits, whatever you call, which is the world. No leaf, no fruit, nothing is separate from the other. This is how we say Vasudeva Kutumbakam. What is Vasudeva? Krishna is known as Vasudeva, who is the seed of this universe, creating the whole tree, and the tree becomes Vasudeva Kutumbakam, the family of the Vasudeva. He says, Karmanyavadikaraste, don't bother about the fruits. What does it mean? Look at any leaf, look at any branch, look at any flower. Anybody living for itself? No. Who is living for whom? This is the question, let us identify. None. None. No seed also is going to enjoy the fruits. We want to enjoy our own fruits. Where do we see the difference? We are all mortals. But no tree, no seed will enjoy the fruits. Flower is not working for itself. Leaf is not working for itself. Fruit is not working for itself. This is what you call Vasudeva Kutumbakam. This is what you call Sanatan Dharma. If I am a seed, my first dharma is to turn into a tree. If I can't, then my life is waste. I can keep myself in a refrigerator for some time, I may be safe, but I'll get rotten even there also. The beauty of my life is turning into a tree, bearing fruits for this society, not for me, not for us. Giving shelter, shade to all passerbys, giving place to all birds for their nests. This is where you have to come to Sanatan Dharma. The definition of Sanatan Dharma lies elsewhere. I say I am Brahmasmi. Everybody in India, you talk to through any ancient literature. We are the replica of this Brahman universe. We contain all the elements of this universe in our body. Our body also works on the same principles as that of this universe. We are not two different things. Today you see all scientists are looking for this God particle. When I say I am Brahma, my seed is not God particle. We all are Brahma. Reincarnations of Brahma. Krishna says, I reside in every heart. Then everybody is Krishna. The seed of everybody is not God particle. But what is the science in it which we do not really follow? Krishna says where he finally puts the seed. In Mahat Loka, Mam Yoni Mahat Brahma, the fourth level in all the 7 layers of this cosmos. So, the life, the soul, it travels from the sun because he is the father of this universe. We are all taking birth there. Our map starts there from the road map. And we travel from that tiny level, atomic level, whatever you call it, to this gross body in 5 different stages. My body is mortal, I am immortal. So we are 2 in 1. So our body travels from the sun from a different route. Our soul travels to this body in a different route. They are not produced simultaneously. But let us learn it that the God puts the seed in the central core of the 7 layers of this cosmos. Wherever, in all 5 stages, when it takes from gross to grosser to grosser, let us see, this is the last station of our taking reincarnation is this gross body, is the human form. Could be animal form, birds, everyone has the same level of the seed, same seed, because we are all same. We are all Brahmas. So the seed of everybody is the same. And that is what we call God particle. I'll give a small example. We are born out of our parents. But what does it mean? Our soul is not mortal. Parents can't produce it. They give us a way to travel to this world. This is more important. And this seed comes to father through the same four stages, from the sun to the clouds, to rain, to the earth, and the vegetation we eat, and it takes the 7 generation genes. And then the seed passes on. Now the seed, when the seed, the liquid is not the seed. It contains the seed. There is a cell which has its own body, physical body. And that physical body also has its own seed. You see, the process is, we pick up only the verses, we translate only those verses. We don't have the scientific research on those. Each verse talks about science. Each verse. And this cell, this seed of this cell will reach the central core of the 7 layers in the mother's body. If you can locate that Mahad Brahm, Krishna says, my Mahad Brahm. Mam Yoni Mahad Brahm. That every time I put a seed, I put in that level of the universe. So it is a physical level or cosmic level or a divine level. At every level you have to look for the central core level of those 7. We have 7 levels of the universe. Bhuva, Swayam, Ajana, Tapa, Satyam, all 7 lokas we call. Inside the earth, there are 7 layers. In our body, there are 7 layers. So I don't just talk about the 7 colors of the rainbow, but I'm talking just the science. 7 layers, and if you pick up those areas, then definitely we come to the conclusion that when our seed, Krishna says, I am the seed of this universe. Everyone is born out of my seed. See his declaration. So this seed lies in every body. Whether it's a male, he preserves it. A female, it grows it. When we are looking for the God particle, why we don't look for this seed? It produces Krishna in everybody. And when he says, Yada Yada Dharmasya Kalani, whenever there is a problem or a catastrophe, the religion is in trouble, I take birth. We are all Krishnas. If I see some problem before me, I must get ready and fight it out. Then I am Krishna. You don't have to wait for hundreds and thousands of years to see the Krishna. Everyone is Krishna. Let us look into the science of that Gita. We are not talking. My problem, when I see around, all this Indian literature is converted into the philosophy. And philosophy doesn't go beyond this 100 years of life. So the problem is, even if you go to the universities, Vedic universities, the research doesn't take them beyond this, the meaning of the verses beyond this life, before this life. When you say Sanatana, it comes from all 3 life, past, present and future. There is no change in the meaning. Every verse is applicable to all 3 times, 3 periods. There is no change. You can translate them to any other life stage. You can translate it to animals, to plants. Even why this iron and gold and silver, they are rusted? Because there is Atma inside. It has to work. The only thing, they don't have the senses. The speed is minimum. From this body is known as earth. And earth is produced out of water. This earth also is produced out of the sea waters. The whole earth is produced out of these waters. whole Brahmand universe is produced out of the waters. This is all simple scientific principles. It will never change. That's why let us see it is Sanatana. When this Atma doesn't die, Sanatan Dharma doesn't. Dharma is, you can say it's my relation with my God. That's all. I may be a friend, I may be a father, I may be a son, I may be a friend, or I may dance with that God. Whatever, this is my Dharma. The problem with the West is twofold. It does not contain the divine part of the Indian version. I don't say it's right or wrong. No, sorry. We have three levels: physical level, spiritual level, and divine level. Divine level, we call them the gods. And they are so it's synonymous with pranas. So when we say there are 33 gods, there are 33 pranas. Pranas are the link between the physical and the spiritual world, universe. In Western philosophy, there is no prana. There is no Adideva, we call it Adideva. There is no Adideva. So there is one link missing. And the second thing is that Veda says that the earth is divided into two hemispheres, east and west, which we are discussing today. East is dominant with the heat. It's a hotter area. Then the west dominated with the cooler climate, weather. The two different personalities will always be there. The east will be ruled by Indra, the prana Indra. West is ruled by the prana Varuna. Agni, Soma, the same. You are talking about the science. There are only two things, matter and energy. You can convert them each other. They cannot be destroyed. Can be interchanged. So Soma, the West is Soma. Soma is the matter. It creates material world all through in the world, in the universe. Whole matter is converted or created by Soma. Soma is put into the fire, the Agni. It consumes the Soma and it takes the new shape. So the West is whole material life. You can understand simply. And when you come to this, because you see the body is just one, and it is the reflection of the three parts inside. Body is 1/4. You have mind, you have intellect, you have soul or Atma inside. 3/4 of us, we live inside the body, and body is just the mirror of these three. So the East is more basically confined to those three levels of life, more busy with the soul, the rebirth, you see, and taking care of the future life also, taking calculations from the past life also. That's why this is Sanatana.
Gulab, can I just say thank you so much. I know you're just beginning. You're just getting wound up and starting. The problem we have is time.
Oh, I agree with you. Thank you for giving me this opportunity.